The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom is a crowd pleaser, and I mean that as a compliment. This title, co-developed by Nintendo and Grezzo, no relation, is a fun throwback to the Zelda titles of yore. It features a charming art style, classic game design involving dungeons and exploration, and just an overall sense of fun. And this is notable given that the current state of the Legend of Zelda franchise is far removed from what it once was. After all, 2017's Breath of the Wild and 2023's Tears of the Kingdom were very well received and sold well, yet deviated from the designs of the traditional Zelda format. Sure, some Zelda gameplay fixtures remained untouched, which is to say these games have puzzle solving, sword combat, exploration, and very irritable yet puntable chickens, as all Legend of Zelda titles should, but Breath of the Wild and its follow-up Tears of the Kingdom majorly deviated from the traditional Zelda format. These games featured a controversial weapon durability system, a de-emphasis on dungeons as being the greatest parts of the Zelda experience in terms of gameplay, puzzle solving, and boss fights, cutscenes that utilized voice actors, puzzles that were more open-ended and self-creative rather than environmental, and then finally collecting a near overwhelming amount of items meant to be consumed and then discarded, at least even more so than older Zelda titles who are now applying for their AARP card. And when combined, all of these gameplay uniquities, even with their high-quality execution, are not of classic Zelda design. They are relatively new to the franchise. And look, I'm actually on board with the new direction that the Zelda franchise has taken as of late, especially as it pertains to Tears of the Kingdom. Hell, earlier in 2024, I released a video on Tears of the Kingdom describing why it is such a great game. But still, with that said, there are many people who are not on board with the Legend of Zelda franchise's new direction. No relation. In fact, some longtime Zelda fans believe that the franchise has abandoned its roots. And honestly, unlike my horrible life decisions, I really can't blame them for that opinion. Mostly because the Zelda franchisal gameplay and storytelling formula is timeless. Its game structure can be recycled over and over again with inventive elements that always allow the newer games to maintain some form of identity, especially after the mainline titles transitioned from a top-down two-dimensional format and entered the world of 3D via Ocarina of Time. Games that altered the gameplay upon each release, like Majora's Mask being weird, the vast majority of Wind Waker's map being on water, how in Twilight Princess Link turns into a shadow wolf, as well as the fact that he is accompanied by a companion that is an actual well-written and well-rounded character, which was new ground for this franchise. And then of course there was Skyward Sword, which featured the innovative gameplay conceit of being borderline playable, because nothing says gameplay precision like motion controls that are as unresponsive as I am when I'm watching a Hallmark movie. I feel nothing. In other words, the Zelda franchise, aside from the misstep that was Skyward Sword, paved new avenues to explore and reinvent the franchise within the framework of the series' core gameplay and story structure, and did so upon each release, all to the point that the series could have kept doing this forever, like a song by Dream Theater. Hence why a fair few Zelda devotees were not really on board with the change of direction for the franchise that began with Breath of the Wild. They missed the older style of game, grieving and mourning the Zelda franchise that once was, a true fallen empire of classical game design. And while I do enjoy the new take on the Zelda series, as represented by Breath of the Wild and the superior Tears of the Kingdom, there was nothing wrong with the traditional Zelda format because it remains fun. And seeing as the newer mainline titles eschewed that said format, it was really unfortunate for those who adored the tried and true Zelda experience, because that shit remains great, which was honestly true for many fans, whether they liked Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom or not. This brings us back to The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. As mentioned earlier, the game was developed by Nintendo and Grezzo. When working with Nintendo, Grezzo normally developed ports and remasters of existing games, with one of their strongest successes being the majorly praised and financially lucrative 2019 remake of Link's Awakening, which was a major financial and critical success. And with Echoes of Wisdom, Nintendo and Grezzo crafted a wholly original yet impressive throwback to the Zelda titles of old. The game featured numerous and intricately crafted dungeons filled with ingenious puzzles, memorable boss battles, and engaging combat. The world was big and had plenty worth exploring, but was not overwhelmingly large. Its top-down, two-dimensional camera and control scheme harkens back to Zelda titles even older than the 3D adventures. The title features a more cartoonish and colorful art style than the modern Zelda games. And then finally, Echoes of Wisdom is more solidly solidly structured compared to the more freestyle gameplay present in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. The gameplay just isn't as open-ended in its design, opting to feature more in-game focal points to solve objectives and puzzles, more so than being a hybrid of Legend of Zelda and Scribblenauts. Though to be clear, this game is admittedly a little less rigid in structure compared to older Zelda games, more on that soon, but still this title is of classical Zelda format more so than groundbreaking. It is old school.
That's the way to do it.
But with that being said, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom is not just a mere rehash of the tried and true Legend of Zelda recipe. In fact, there are numerous iniquities that allow this title to stand out, the most obvious of which is that the player finally plays as Zelda in a major Zelda game. Yes, really, for the first time in a major Legend of Zelda title, Zelda is the main protagonist and not Link. Though unfortunately, Nintendo did miss an opportunity to refer to this game as The Legend of Link. Hey, fair is fair. However, the most notable gameplay difference in Echoes of Wisdom is that Zelda's approach to combat is comparatively more passive than Link's. See, in this title, Zelda is essentially a mage, or a priestess rather. She has a magic staff, kind of like Gandalf or Werner Herzog, a magic stick that grants Zelda the ability to summon echoes, which consists of objects and combatants, many of which Zelda accrues slowly but surely throughout her adventure through Hyrule. Echoes in the form of objects like beds, rocks, and etc. are generally used to solve puzzles, meaning that these puzzles are less scripted compared to older Zelda games, but aren't the do-it-yourself style of Tears of the Kingdom and such, as well as help Zelda traverse difficult terrain and etc., whereas the echoes that are combatants are used to fight hostile enemies. Some of these echoes overlap, like the spider that helps Zelda climb up or down in an indoor setting, as well as this stomping brick platform that moves up and down very quickly. A being of which I have decreed thy name to be Dr. Brickshits. He has a medical degree. Furthermore, Zelda can only summon a certain amount of echoes at a single time, and some echoes cost more than others. She can replace those echoes at any time, whether they are destroyed or not, and clearing void spaces throughout the game's world boosts Zelda's abilities by allowing her to cast more echoes or decrease the cost of the more expensive echoes. Because a floating, teleporting wizard that shoots fireballs? In this economy? I don't think so. Additionally, Zelda has a timed power-up that transforms her into Link, meaning that for a limited amount of time, she can engage in a more offensive combat style rather than passive. You know, because swords are weapons. Ultimately, Echoes of Wisdom's gameplay intricacies breathe new life into the established Zelda formula. Whether Zelda uses rock, bed, or trampoline echoes to reach higher places, or strategically sends out different combative echoes to fight various types of enemies that have different stat and elemental effects, the game, despite being of the classic Zelda mold, forces the player to approach its dungeons, world, exploration, combat, boss fights, and puzzles in a more tactical manner, meaning that Echoes of Wisdom is constructed like an old-style Zelda game, all while containing gameplay that is fresh for the Zelda franchise. Gameplay that arguably has some of the user creativity of Breath of the Wild in terms of usage of echoes, moving around objects, and binding enemies with Zelda's staff, but still nonetheless is gameplay within the structural style of older Zelda adventures. In other words, the game simultaneously harkens back to classic Zelda, all while moving the series in an exciting new direction. And honestly, I hope that Nintendo and Grezzo will develop more Zelda titles of this ilk. Given Echoes of Wisdom's glowing reviews and good sales, Nintendo greenlighting new, smaller Zelda games reminiscent of the franchise's older style and structure, either in between or alongside the releases of Zelda's modern incarnations like Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, is a game design pathway that's worth exploring, unlike Anthem, because clearly there is room for both types of Zelda adventures here. Additionally, this would echo, pun very much intended, Nintendo's strategy for some of its other IP. For instance, Metroid Dread, no relation, was crafted in the vein of older Metroid games, all while Nintendo is still laboring on Metroid Prime 4, which is a more modern take on that respective franchise. Yet the most obvious and noteworthy example of Nintendo double-dipping into its established library and oeuvre is with Mario. In a prior video I released in the first half of 2024, I discussed why Mario is among gaming's most versatile franchises, and one of the reasons for this is because, in between mainline 3D installments, Nintendo also releases 2 or 2.5D side-scrolling Super Mario Mario Bros. Titles that generally always come packaged with new gameplay nuances that cause those set installments to still feel like a unique new spin on that series, despite still containing its basic core gameplay. For example, in Super Mario Wonder, the traditional Super Mario Bros. Format is altered by collectible flowers that transform levels into total acid trips of an experience, causing the player to feel higher than high on fire.
Tripping balls.
Meaning that with Mario, Nintendo has traveled down a financially lucrative path that excited and thrilled fans of both the 3D and the 2D Mario games. And Nintendo can do the same with the Legend of Zelda series. With both Tears of the Kingdom's and Echoes of Wisdom's success, there is clearly a demand for both types of Zelda experiences, ones that celebrate the past, present, and future of this beloved piece of gaming iconography, games that excite all types of Zelda fans, old and new, gameplay experiences that advance the series forward, all while placating members of the fandom miffed by the most recent Zelda installments, proving that we need more Zelda titles like Echoes of Wisdom.